Hey guys, this is PODFIC, and today we're going to be reading Alcatraz, but on hard mode by Sunny Blue. The summary is, how are we planning to escape exactly? Because we have basically no idea where we are, and we're the only team here. And our strategist, he emphasizes the word enough that Tim rolls his eyes, painfully because concussion, woohoo, is stuck in the Alcatraz version of handcuffs. Who the hell is gonna help us? People escaped Alcatraz. Yeah, and then they died 2 seconds later. Technically, we don't know that. I heard they ran away to Argentina. We're literally never getting out of here. Alright, without further ado, let's hop right into chapter 1. Tim Drake is pretty sure that getting kidnapped by aliens is probably not something that would be considered common in most people's lives. Tim Drake is not most people. Far from it actually, if his kidnapped by aliens count as anything to go by. Maybe he can get a punch card. So, he hears Virgil huff behind him. How are we getting out of this one, Chief? He says that like he's been on more than maybe 10 missions. Granted, those 10 or so missions certainly have had the common theme of getting captured, kidnapped, or trapped, but at least this time it's kind of interesting because it's aliens. Plus, these aliens seem smart. The League's intel on them has turned out not to be entirely accurate, which leaves Tim effectively unfamiliar with the race or technology. But from what he can tell, the restraints the squad has been put in are kind of like the inhibitor collars. Somehow, they recognize the powers of the wearer and turn them off. Bart, in particular, is mad about this development. And considering his inability to sit still, Tim can't say he blames him. Of course, Tim has no superpowers for the restraint to turn off, but the captors didn't need to know that. When they left the squad alone, Tim picked the locks in 2 seconds flat, hit his Batcave-connected emergency beacon because he's not stupid, and started moving to free Virgil. And then, because Tim is a bat, and just attracts bad luck, the door of their cell burst open and 3 guards stormed inside, for the express purpose of kicking the shit out of him. He realized as the blows rained down that the restraints probably had some kind of heart monitor on them that alerted guards when a pulse disappears. He also realized that he was really fucking dumb for not thinking of that before he tried taking them off. So here Tim is, lying on the floor of a dingy-ass cell inside a freaky-ass mothership with a super painful concussion and a broken nose and some cracked ribs and a fuck ton of bruises, and his entire squad trapped with him. And new restraints, by the way, which is just lovely. These ones are extra heavy-duty too, some kind of unnecessarily thick metal in a wide, rounded form that completely covers both his hands and forearms, locking his wrists and freezing his fingers. His feet and ankles are bound with something similar and have been connected to a strip of the same metal around his thighs, rendering him unable to stand, and his knees are locked together with another strip of metal. Just to top it off, the shackles on his hands are attached to the shackles on his feet, which leaves him basically curled up in a ball facing away from his friends. And his nose is still bleeding like a damn waterfall. Fucking awesome. His foggy brain reminds him that Virgil asked him a question that he hasn't answered yet, but he has no idea what it was. He coughs, spitting out a mouthful of the blood from his nose that won't stop draining down his throat, and turns his head a bit over his shoulder. Sorry, Static. What? Something about Tim's current state. Too many options to count. Makes Virgil wince and soften his voice. But he's learned by now that Robin is a kick-ass kind of tough, and that the bird likely feels much more intact right now than anybody would or should be under the same circumstances. Wondering if we have a plan of attack. How should we? Logan mutters, hunched in the corner of the small cell with his hands resting on his knees. We have basically no idea where we are, and we're the only team here. And our strategist, he emphasizes the word enough that Tim rolls his eyes, painfully because concussion, woohoo, is beat up and stuck in the Alcatraz version of handcuffs. Who the hell is gonna help us? People escaped Alcatraz, Jamie points out from his seat next to Bart, who clearly missed the Alcatraz unit in history class and is just kinda nodding along. Yeah, and then they died 2 seconds later, Logan huffs. Jamie shrugs. We technically don't know that. Some people say they escaped to Argentina, Virgil adds, and Tim can't help but groan, although this time it's in annoyance and not in pain. So, are we planning on getting out, or... Bart cuts in, leaning back against the wall, because I would really, really like to get out. Like a lot. So much. Just a thought. Tim tilts his head back further towards them, wincing with the bolt of pain that the motion sensor seared through his brain. We're gonna get out, kid. Again. How? Logan grumbles. Tim's answer is abandoned in his mind when he feels his guts clench. He's been trying to ignore the blood gushing from his nose so as to not scare his friends, but that kind of means he's been swallowing a lot of it, and his stomach is really not happy with him for it. Tim's masked eyes widen and he opens his mouth to warn his friends, but he's forced to abort his words and turn as far away as he can when heat rolls up his throat and he retches hard, vomiting bright red blood and what remains of his lunch onto the cold metal floor. He grumbles, though it sounds more like a pissed off whine, and he resigns himself to letting his body freak out for a minute so he can focus better later. By the time he stops throwing up, he manages to prop himself up on one shoulder to get further away from his friends. But it's over now, and he's exhausted enough that he lets himself carefully fall back to fully resting on his side. His tongue feels like a lump of hot wet metal, and he winces at the taste he knows too damn well, curling his lip and spitting it out as best he can. Tim drags in a slow breath, holds it, and presses it back out, frustrated and tired, and really not liking the fact that his friends just saw that, because they're definitely going to react like it's a huge deal, and it's just not what they need to be focused on right now. Sure enough, all 4 of his squad members are suddenly talking all at once, and it's really not doing anything to help the pulsing headache his concussion is twisting into the nerves behind his eyes. "Shut up," he says, not harsh, but not kind either. His voice is just ragged enough to hear it. He clears his throat, and the boys snap their mouths shut. "I'm fine." "Rob, you're throwing up blood," Virgil says gently, like he's breaking the news, and Tim's finding this out for the first time. But Tim really does appreciate his concern. Their concern. He appreciates that they're worried, appreciates that they care about him, enjoys the warm feeling it puts in his chest. But again, they really don't need to be focused on this right now. "It's just the blood from my nose, nothing internal," he reassures, or tries to. Not that it looks like it worked when he turns his head over his shoulder to gauge their reactions. He shakes his head at their wide-eyed stares. Bart's damn puppy eyes are a supernova the restraints can't turn off. "I'm okay, really. Right now we need to be worried about escaping." The boys don't seem concerned, but finally Lagan sighs and appears to refocus, which Tim literally cannot thank him enough for doing, because the others follow soon after. "Do you have a plan?" "Sort of," Tim says, and it's not really the answer he wants to give, but it's what he's got right now, so sue him. "I have a tracker on me that I activated, but there's no guarantee it'll work from space." He pauses to scrunch up his nose and spit out more blood. He's used to the taste, yeah, that doesn't mean he likes it. Tim briefly has a mental image of himself as a vampire bat, and has to stop himself from snorting. He'd be even paler than he is already. "Okay, so do you have a backup plan?" Lagan asks, and the answer is no. Of course he doesn't. He's locked up in a ball on the floor of a dungeon in an alien mothership. You complete and utter dumbass. "It'll have to be a ruse," he says, pushing his doubts away. "I think the restraints have a heart monitor in them. If we take them off, the guards will be alerted, and..." He nods down at his Alcatraz handcuffs. "This. We'll have to unlock them, but keep them on until just the right time. Which of you can pick locks?" He looked back over his shoulder and sees 4 faces, each maintaining a complete blankness in their own way. His eyes narrow. "You... the fuck? None of you know how?" Bart has the decency to look sheepish. "I can always vibrate through." Lagan nods. "I usually break locks." "Scarab uses nanobots to do it," Jamie adds, smiling apologetically. Virgil completes the quartet. "When would I have learned?" Tim blinks once, twice, then groans and let his aching skull rest on the floor. Even the controlled motion sends white-hot spots ricocheting around his vision. He thinks about waiting for one of them to hit the corner of his sight perfectly, like he used to with the TV logo when the screen was paused, but decides he can't waste that much time. Later, though, sounds relaxing, meditative. Maybe Dick will do it with him. He blinks a 3rd time, tries to clear them away. "Remind me to update our technical skills training," he says sincerely, and the corners of Virgil's lips quirk upwards as he nods. "Well, if we can't get ourselves out, then what?" Jamie is cut off sharply when an alarm starts screaming outside their cell, and Tim is about 800% sure it's the loudest goddamn thing he's ever heard. He grits his teeth and squeezes his eyes shut, trying not to let himself bite down on his lip or tongue, because that's just gonna end with more blood in his mouth. His head is pounding and throbs with each blare. His friends are saying something behind him, and they sound like they're yelling too, and oh my god, why won't it stop? Holy shit. But it doesn't, and everything is so fucking loud, and Tim is probably a bit more concussed than he realized, and that is literally ridiculous at this point, because he hears what sounds like gunshots in the distance, and isn't that just a lovely addition to his plight at the moment? He's gonna make everyone a SoundCloud track called Concussion 2015, and everyone will think it's the soundtrack for the film with Will Smith, but instead it's just going to be a recording of exactly what he is hearing right now in order to simulate a concussion, and it's going to fuck with everyone, and it'll be super funny. Okay, yeah, running that back, Tim is definitely a bit more concussed than he realized. A huge smashing sound sends an iron spike into his brain, but an instant later he's thankful for it, because the alarm goes blessedly silent immediately. Tim lets out a heavy sigh and sags as much as he can against the restraint, spitting out another mouthful of blood as he lets the final wave of noise-induced pain dull back into a more typical concussion-style headache. "Robin, talk to this man." Tim sighs again, lighter this time, and forces his eyes open. "I'm good," he says airily, and once again turns his head over to look at them. Even though he knows it's probably a bad idea, it's worth it. Forsyth's eyes soften with relief when he meets them. "Estás bien, hermano?" Jamie asks, voice respectfully and knowingly quiet. "Y entiendo peor," Tim replies, and Jamie grins, which was the goal. They all seem to settle a little more, and Tim understands why. He can't possibly be too concussed if he remembers all his languages. Not that they have proof that he remembers all of them, but he does. And for the record, they would only really have a cause for concern if he could suddenly only speak Russian. So as far as Tim's concerned, as long as he could still see shapes and still know the difference between Russian and English, it's all good. Bart opens his mouth to say something and instead startles when a heavy metallic clanging sound comes from somewhere down the long hallway. Oh shit, did he not imagine those gunshots? Fuck. He thought they were just a figment of his mind being an asshole. He hears the sound of a gun hammer cocking back and a low whimper, and realizes that someone is really inside the mothership. He just hopes they're friendly. Where the fuck is my brother? Ah, of course. Alright guys, that is the end of chapter 1 of Alcatraz, but on hard mode by Sunny Blue. Hope you guys liked it, and I'll see you next chapter.